I'm going to go put this in the kitchen so we can listen to it. Well, we finished the emptying out chapter last week, and that's how it was concepts to dump, and they do all have to go. But this week we're going to read chapter 2, the 3 levels of human consciousness, and this is very basic, fundamental stuff. It's just important to know what is material consciousness and what is mental consciousness and what is spiritual consciousness. The 3 divisions are always there. Yoga talks about body, mind, and spirit, and there's orthodox religion and there's physical religions and mystical religions, and we need to know what belongs in each area so that we'll know what we're talking about in the rest of the book. So I think we'll just... Well, any questions about anything we've done so far? And it's been almost a shame to dive into this. It's so mundane after the weekend with Tony, you know, and that kind of sublime the mud. But this is the foundation for understanding what Tony was talking about. You know, this is the basis that if you understand it, you'll get even higher next year when Tony comes to town. So let's do it. Let's read, see how far we get. We'll jump in after, whenever you want to jump in. Instead of reading the paragraph at a time, I think we'll read a section at a time because it's broken into a bunch of little sections now. But if you can interrupt anytime you want, or we'll pause after each section. So let's start. Why don't you read the whole first introduction thing here?
The 3 levels of human consciousness. To understand what spiritual consciousness is, we need to survey the landscape of human consciousness and learn what spiritual consciousness isn't. We should begin by starting that consciousness does not really have different levels. Humans don't have different levels of awareness of consciousness. When we talk about developing spiritual consciousness, we really mean developing an awareness of consciousness that we have always been. The human experience in which we are all participating conforms to certain laws. One is that everything starts in its simplest form. All trees start as acorns, plants start as seeds, birds start as eggs, and animals start as babies. The universe itself started with a Big Bang. The solar system started with exploding stars. Conscious entities began unaware, ignorant, and spent their lives learning. Everything begins simple and matures. This is also true of human consciousness, individual and collective. Collective or universal human consciousness is simply the aggregate of all the individual human consciousnesses. Life on Earth began unconscious. Gradually, more advanced life types developed, exhibiting higher levels of consciousness. Eventually, human beings arrived with self-consciousness. Similarly, individual humans have, over a period of many lifetimes, gone through experiences which have slowly raised their level of consciousness, usually by using the time-tested technique of discovering, item by item, what didn't work. The expansion of human consciousness from total ignorance to transcendence is a continuum, but for our purposes, we will identify and talk about 3 distinct phases in the process: material, mental, and spiritual consciousness. We'll compare the concepts that define each level of consciousness with respect to matter, power, God, prayer, religion, supply, and healing.
Read the matter.
Material consciousness. Material consciousness is the lowest level of human consciousness. The great majority of humanity operates at this level. It's the long part of the path, dealing with little more than animal instincts. Matter. Material consciousness thinks matter is real, physical, external to itself, out there. The material concept of matter has grown more sophisticated over time. To the early Greeks, matter was made up of 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Later they threw in ether to contain the other 4. Now there are over 100 elements on the periodic chart. Science's concept of these elements has changed from little hard particles flying around each other to waves, to probability clouds, to something with characteristics of all of these. No doubt we'll move on, but what defines material consciousness is the belief that matter is an external reality governed by the laws of physics.
Animal matter, animal physics.
Matter, power. Excuse me. In material consciousness, power is physical force. Human beings think in terms of overcoming, using more powerful forces to overcome lesser forces, and probably beginning with rocks, sticks, and clubs. Spiritual came with sticks and clubs. Then someone invented the bow and arrow and was able to overcome the spirit. They, in turn, were overcome by guns. We moved on to cannons, with bombs, with airplanes to deliver them, and atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs. Each more powerful force was invented to overcome the previous force. Usually to bring peace. We can take a look back at the world to see how effective this approach has been. There are many things which have power in material consciousness: germs, viruses, drugs, weather, financial trends, politicians, armies, bulls. Human beings spend billions of dollars every year developing new, better powers to overcome them. The way human beings try to get what they want, whether it's peace, prosperity, or someone else's property, is to find a more powerful force.
God. The concept of God, which we talked about emptying out in the previous chapter, are those held by material consciousness. Material concepts of God usually involve an anthropomorphic being with specific powers which are affected in the material world. God potentially can give us something, remove something from us, or overcome something we think needs to be overcome. Beings with a material level of consciousness typically have gods, which are simply another step in the process of finding a greater power with which to overcome.
Nothing else for us? Pray about it.
Prayer. And prayer, of course, is the attempt to use the God power to get, remove, or overcome whatever we find ourselves unhappy about. Materialistic prayers usually involve informing God of what we feel has been overlooking or neglecting, and finding the right words or rituals to influence it to correct the situation. This type of prayer implies certain characteristics of God that most prefer to ignore. A God that can be influenced to give something must be currently withholding it. A God that can be talked into removing something must be currently allowing it to remain. And a God that can overcome something must be currently permitting it to be as it is. Or God must be unaware of those things.
Religion. Materialistic religion focus on introspection with a power separate from the devotee. Most primitive and orthodox religions are materialistic. Materialistic religions typically involve such things as rites, idols, and ceremonies. They tend to have dogmas, doctrines, and rules to be adhered to by the followers. They usually involve priest classes to intercede with the god or gods for their members. They are often political and self-serving. They often keep their membership through promises of rewards and punishments to be awarded in the future. They function as intermediaries between the worshippers and the worshipped. They seldom focus on raising the level of the member's consciousness or bringing the member to their own religious experience.
The material concept of supply is income and possessions, including dollars, stocks and bonds, food, clothing, companionship, jobs. Material human consciousness believes supply comes from out there and is limited. What one has, another can have, and there's not enough for everybody. This leads to the very human concern with self-preservation, taking care of ourselves, often at the expense of others, getting ours before someone else gets it, being cleverer than the others, and competing with 6 billion other human beings for our supply, a very stressful way of life. Stress is a sure sign of a material consciousness.
Healing. The material concept of healing is doctors, medication, surgeries, cures. Germs and viruses cause diseases, vaccines and drugs cure them. It's about applying the power of medicine to overcome the power of disease. We apply our best medical solutions to our medical problems. 200 years ago, medicine was ignorant and limited, doing all sorts of things considered wrong today, such as bleeding people to let out evil spirits. Now medicine is very sophisticated. The diagnostic equipment in this country is unsurpassed. Our capabilities are much greater. We now have very expensive drugs to treat almost everything. However, even with an increase in life expectancy, there is no significant reduction in the percentage of people who are sick. We've wiped out tuberculosis and now have AIDS, wiped out polio and now have chronic fatigue syndrome, lupus, etc. New diseases continually arise, as well as new versions of old ones. The germs and viruses evolved to overcome the medicines that were invented to overcome them. The material approach to healing is just another attempt to overcome with material power. So material consciousness deals with what it considers to be an external reality of material things. It is characterized by attempting to use powers, gods, prayers, and religions to overcome problems such as lack, limitation, and disharmony.
So that's the fundamental material consciousness that is where most of the 6 billion people operate there. And most of us have operated there for a part of our lifetime anyway. And it's all about, it's real, and I need to overcome it and take care of myself, and there's not enough, and it's all the beliefs that are the underlying source of all the problems in politics and religion and everything else. You know, and the underlying basis of our problems is the materialistic consciousness that thinks we have to apply force to overcome, to apply power to overcome. It's been an hour on the ludicrousness of the politics of this and every other country in, it practically doesn't work. Trying to overcome, trying to prevent. Anyway, none of that is what we're going to talk about in this book. Let's go on.
Mental consciousness. Human consciousness gradually developed to a point at which the guy with the most powerful force didn't necessarily win because people started using intelligence. Strategy became involved. Sometimes a good intellect overcame a greater force. Intellect is also used in areas such as science, medicine, and economics. But mental consciousness is not using the intellect to better apply material powers.
Mental consciousness began when people became aware of the power of mind. Mystery schools, which knew and taught how to use the power of the mind to control matter, existed in ancient Egypt and Greece. Also, many primitive tribes knew a great deal about the use of mind, as demonstrated by their witch doctors, wizards, shamans, etc. Western civilization had lost most of the knowledge of mental power until places like the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory began to demonstrate that the mind can be used to move and control matter. It can, for example, roll backwards in a way. But that's just the kindergarten level of what we're talking about.
The material level of consciousness is associated with matter in a lot of physics. The mental level of consciousness is associated with the mind in a lot of metaphysics. The prefix meta means beyond, transcending, more comprehensive. Metaphysics means transcending physics, transcending the physical laws of matter and energy. The mental state of consciousness uses the power of mind to manifest, change, or eliminate material things according to the laws of metaphysics. The metaphysical church movement began in the second half of the 19th century when people like Mary Baker Eddy revealed and began to demonstrate the power of mind, especially the healing power. These people discovered that what we call the material world is contained within mind, and that mind controls matter. The metaphysical churches demonstrated that mind creates our experience of matter, and that mind can be used to transform matter. The Christian Science Church in Mary and Mrs. Eddy's time had 3,000 congregations and 15,000 practitioners who use mental consciousness to heal all varieties of physical discord. The size and longevity of the metaphysical church movement testifies to the effectiveness of the power of the mind.
I have a question about that. Is this type of work that Mary Baker Eddy and her practitioners are doing, does that ever run out of steam? Does that make sense? Does it ever lose its effectiveness?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. Just like material power loses its effectiveness, especially in the case of healing, which is the most visible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we take drugs, we build an immunity to them. And as we take drugs to whatever we're working on, builds up an immunity to them. Similarly, they discovered, and there's a nice bill tape on this actually, you can only do mental healing to people for so long, and it takes more and more power and more power because the mind itself, mental healing requires, and we maybe talk about this a little bit here, but mental healing requires transferring the power of your mind to the planet and changing their belief with the power of your mind. And the fact is that if you're using the power of your mind to change the belief in my mind rebels. And it will build up a resistance to your ability, and you will become less and less able. So a person can only receive mental healing for so long, especially from the same practitioner. So it does run out of gas.
What Joel did was not mental healing.
No, Joel did spiritual healing.
Okay.
And it had nothing to do with it at all. Joel very clearly does not transfer thought or power.
I remember you saying at one time that even when people would come back and back and back, if their consciousness didn't change, then eventually he would be unable. They would get sick again.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, but we'll get to spiritual healing. But yeah, I mean, your consciousness. What mental power is saying is that your beliefs are creating your experience. Okay. And so even though a spiritual hero like Joel can lift you above that, you're not going to stay there. You will slot back down to where you were. And if you don't work on changing your consciousness, you're not going to change your picture. It's the same action that we base the scripting the kid work on. That your experience is the outpicturing of the content of your consciousness, your beliefs. And so regardless of what kind of healing you get, if your beliefs don't change, you're going to be back there in a different person. Robert used to talk about, the tumor on the left arm, you get it removed surgically, and it grows on your right arm, you get it removed surgically, and it grows on your left, and you get it removed surgically, And the problem is that you're not you're not working on the you're not working on the problem. You're removing the symptoms rather than addressing the problem, which is pulling the consumers. Go on.
One is also what Nathaniel asked, what is this mind? The answer she received was, you're looking at it. It was saying that everything we are aware of through our five senses is actually within mind. Remember the discussion in the section on matter in the previous chapter about my inability to prove to myself that anything is really out there, not just in my brain. It was saying that what we call space is mind. You can think of mind as a bubble in which the human experience is taking place, not unlike the dream bubble created by individual consciousnesses when we sleep. Just as material, tangible things appear in the mind bubbles of our dreams, mental consciousness considers material, tangible things to be five sense images in mind, not out there as material consciousness believes. For people who haven't encountered this way of thinking before, it can be very difficult. Mental consciousness sounds like nonsense to those who are still immersed in material consciousness. We'll walk through the 7 topics that we covered under material consciousness to get a clearer idea of mental consciousness.
Okay? Mental consciousness is really saying that it's all in mind. Not necessarily it's all in your mind, but it's all in mind, that it's all images in mind, and that there is, what it's saying is that there is fundamentally no difference between this experience we're having and the dreams we might have tonight to sleep. Fundamentally no difference. Both of those are five sense experiences that take place in mind, in consciousness, within consciousness. That's what it's saying. Okay, please.
Mental consciousness realizes that matter is formed of the mind within itself, within the time-space bubble which it is. Matter is one form of the mind, thoughts are another. Like ice, water, and steam are there forms of the mind functions as thought. Mind appears as matter. The content of mind is perceived by our five senses as matter. Metaphysics is the science which describes the nature of the matter as mind, and the behavior of the matter as conforming to thoughts and beliefs in mind. Mind is both the cause and the substance of matter.
Let's pause there. Do you all hear that? I mean, I don't expect you to believe it, but do you all hear what it's saying? Do you get the point? Mind functions as thought and appears as matter. It's all expressing the mind.
Power. To the mental level of consciousness, only power is mind. Power of mind over matter. By learning to use the power of mind, matter can be created, altered, or restored. For example, from the metaphysical viewpoint, the power of mind can be used to heal sickness. The thousands of healings brought about by practitioners in metaphysical churches prove that germs, viruses, infections, etc., are not powers in the presence of a developed mental consciousness. We commonly see an example of the power of mind.
Let's pause 1 second there. I wanted to say something. If there is such a thing as a successful mental practitioner, and somebody comes to them suffering from the flu, and the mental practitioner does what he does or she does, and the flu symptoms all disappear, that's a demonstration of the fact that the flu germ didn't have any power. Right? I mean, it's proof that in the presence of a mental consciousness, that material flu germs don't have the power to cause sickness, because even though they had been doing so until the mental practitioner showed up, the presence of the mental practitioner, or the power of the mind of the mental practitioner, made the apparent effect of the flu virus disappeared. Okay, and this went on, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times. There's way too much documentation of the power of mind to remove sickness without it. So that's the point there. It demonstrates that in the presence of a strong mental consciousness, at least the material powers of certain diseases have no power. Mm-hmm.
So if I come to you and I have symptoms of flu, and you are as a practitioner, and you know that that's not to use your mind to know there's no power here, what is my mind doing at that time?
I don't know.
I mean, can it still believe it and it will be gone? Or are you changing my perception?
We're arguing about the strength of mind in this case.
Yeah, no, but I just wanted to know, are you changing my perception of what is not really there?
No, I'm changing your mind.
Okay, that's okay.
For you.
Okay.
Because you needed to.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
And yet, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's funny the fact that, so you say there's, this has been going on for thousands of years, and there's tens of thousands of demonstrations. 98% of everybody that I know will absolutely swear up and down that I should vaccinate my children, that I should blah, 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 blah. And,
because they're totally immersed in material consciousness.
right. But even the ones who attend church religious life for 10 years. It's just, and so what I'm remembering is the KFUC and the KGOD and the strength of the broadcast. It just seems like.
Yeah, the fact that somebody attends the Church of Religious Science doesn't mean that they're rational even. I mean, lots of people wander around with absolutely inconsistent thoughts in the same mind. Right?
Right.
Nobody that goes to church believes what they teach in church. Nobody believes what they say in church.
But also the concept.
Including the priests don't believe what they're saying. Nobody in church believes what they're saying. They don't believe God is omnipotent. I mean, in the Orthodox, in the Presbyterian church, they'll say God has all power, but you better get your flu shot. And that's no different from the religious science.
Right.
Except it's material. One is saying that material has power, the other one's saying that metaphysical has power, but not really. You better get your shots,
But also the consciousness of you is not the consciousness of your child.
Well, but the consciousness of you is the consciousness of your child until the child is 8 or 10. You're in charge. Your consciousness is controlling your kid's wellness for the first 8 or 10 years.
But there's a lot of, world consciousness out there stuff too,
And have the power you think it does, right?
World consciousness only has power if you believe it.
Right.
Well, that's like asking about you healing me. I have to believe that you can do that.
If I'm strong enough, you don't. If I'm strong enough, you will. That's the mental power. When you get to the level of witchcraft and voodoo and stuff like that, they don't much care what you believe.
So that's what Michael was just saying, like, a million people believe you have to have this shot. How powerful is one person against all that belief? You were just saying your mind is stronger than mine could change your mind.
Absolutely. Yes. But so what's the question? And what the 6 billion believe doesn't matter. If my mind's strong, it changes your mind. I'm certainly stronger. My mind can certainly be stronger than than humankind. Okay, in a moment. Okay, but they'll win eventually because you got to be. If you can stay conscious 24/7, knowing the truth, right? They're impotent. There's no power in human consciousness when it's addressed. Lies don't have power when they're seen. But if you're, we'll get to that later. But it's subliminal. It's omnipresent.
Right.
And that's why you don't want to casually listen to the news and stuff because it affects you.
I'm listening to it casually or intently. Casually,
That's the thing. I know that I'm thinking like
mentioning this, not just religious science, Christian science, and I know that Joel had one of his first healings, or one of the couple different healings by a Christian science practitioner. So did he have a mental healing, or was he just so open, or the consciousness was so high the person he went to, did he have a, I guess that's...
I'm sure he had mental healings from Christian science practitioners, as did his father, and he also had an enlightenment experience as a result of a very high Christian science practitioner. I mean, just because a person's in a mental church doesn't mean they're not a mystic, doesn't mean they're not healing spiritually, and just because a person's in a mystical church and having healings doesn't mean he's doing it spiritually, he might be doing it mentally. Or they might be slipping food fibers in your cocktail, I don't know, The fact is that Joel sat down and went to a very high practitioner. And instead of getting his cold fixed, although it did get his cold fixed, he also had an enlightenment experience. So this is a statement of the consciousness of the practitioner. And Mary Baker Eddy was certainly a very high practitioner. Joel also was a Christian science practitioner for years.
Yeah, I was going to say,
but he was a spiritual healer.
But the years that he spent as a practitioner helped him learn the letter of truth and like the footwork that we're doing.
But he was a spiritual healer from the get-go, not a mental healer. He never was a mental healer, even though he was in the Christian Science church. So, I mean, don't draw lines. I know that Christian Science church is supposed to be mental, and the Church of Religious Science is supposed to be the mystical aspect of it, and they're not. It depends on who's running the particular church. Depends on the height of the head man, Reverend Michael, who's pretty mystical, pretty good on Joel, for instance. So that church will have a very high spiritual message, but it's not pure. It's not pure at all. Still a lot of mental stuff going on in that church. I mean, that's one of the highest religious science churches I know of. And some other ones around here have no consciousness at all about anything, which is the same.
The Christian Science have a big scandal because practitioners were doing what you were just talking about, using the power of
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, okay, because I thought that's kind of what happened if they had, like what Diane was talking about.
I don't have any experience about that. I wasn't there or anything, so I don't know about that.
Please ask a question. This might be off the topic a little bit, or I think something growing from ignorance to enlightened consciousness. With respect to thousands of lifetimes and everything else, if who we truly are is pure enlightened consciousness anyway, who brings the ignorance into the next lifetime? Or is it just part of the one universal mind that's on the path that you're a part of when you come back? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I know what you're asking.
How does the ignorance get carried over?
I don't have any idea what the mechanism is. All I can tell you is the way it appears to work. And the way it appears to work is that each lifetime we make whatever progress we make, and when we come in the next lifetime, we come in at that level of awareness. And we also come in without conscious memory of our previous lifetime. We each have to learn every lesson ourselves. And whatever I learn this lifetime, I take into my next one.
But the self that needs to learn anything is the small left self, right?
Sure, the myth, the story. Sure.
So there's an aspect of that carries over.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what typically is referred to as the soul. And there certainly is a constant. You got a karmic data bank that comes with you each time, which really has all of your past history in it and your past beliefs and your current developed level of consciousness, which really boils down to your current level of beliefs. Your current beliefs. You bring in your beliefs. You bring in your concepts. You bring in your conditioning. And here you are. That's what they mean by samskaras and samskaras in the Sanskrit that Robert talks about. You bring in tendencies and habits, and really you bring in you bring in exactly what you went out with. And it can be shown by people who do past life experience work, and all the data is still there. I mean, all of your life is in your data bank, but it's not accessible, not immediately accessible. Or you'd be very unhappy, realizing the ways in which you killed and been killed.
I love that when you say about Joel, that Joel always had some awareness on the wholeness, the truth, the reality.
His life, his most recent lifetime.
In his most recent lifetime.
But Joel was very, very exceptional.
But I just like that idea of thinking about just keep 1% of awareness all the time.
Joel still talks about that. He always had these back there. Robert always had all his awareness.
1% seems easier to strive for. Like whenever I'm in it, I think, oh, there's 1% of me all the time that knows all is well. And if I can focus on that 1%, it gets bigger.
That's right.
And the more I focus on it, the bigger it gets. Right. And it takes my attention off of the part that seems to be get caught up in human head.
Let's move on. Yes.
So I heard Robert, I think I heard Robert say it, and I heard it this weekend from Tony. It's just like the first question. The whole thing about like reincarnation and karma, and I remember he was asking Robert, and he's like, well, if you believe in karma, then you're going to carry karma. And then Tony this weekend is saying, like, there's no such thing as reincarnation, because there was no incarnation. And I don't know, those words are just kind of hung, like, I don't really...
Yeah, that's not appropriate at this chapter of this book. Remember the question and bring it up again. Let's skip it before we start talking about that, because you're asking us to talk at a very high level, and we're in fact talking about another level of human consciousness right now. So I can discuss that later in chapter 5 or 6.
All of our minds have questions, though.
Right. But if this is a book study, then it's a book study, and we need to make some progress. Who's reading?
We commonly see an example of the power of mind of another in our bodies, although we seldom stop to realize it. When we become afraid, our bodies get ready to fight or run. This appears as increased heart rate, blood pressure, and adrenaline. Fear, the trigger for this change, is in the mind. The material function of the body has been altered by the mind. One problem with material power is that whenever we apply a material force, we may run into someone with a stronger force. The problem with mental power is that whenever we attempt to use mental power, we may run into someone with a stronger mind, or a group with a stronger mind. We also must continually overcome the conditioned false beliefs of the 6 billion. The fact that so many share a common belief constantly exerts some level of mental power, which will manifest those beliefs if it is unopposed.
That's what you were commenting about. It's there, it's omnipresent. Okay.
God, in metaphysical churches, God is sometimes called divine mind, the creator and sustainer of all that exists in mind. Of course, the application of both material and mental powers does not require God. Mental healings, for example, are demonstrations of the power of the mind, not of something spiritual.
Prayer. Affirmations are a common use of mental power, which might be considered as mental prayer. The idea is that affirming something which isn't currently true in our experience exerts mental power, which will cause it to become true. Having a positive attitude is an effective example of this. Visualizing abundance or good outcomes of future endeavors are other examples that work for some people. Most prayer groups are really examples of mental prayers. Joel talks about a preacher who wrote a book on how to use prayer for good and evil. He had two identical collections of plants in identical situations. He had one group of people pray for one collection to be healthy and beautiful, and another group pray for the other plants to die. The plants that were being prayed for positively exhibited unusual good growth, and the others did die. Joel comments that the experiments accurately recorded reproducible results, but the results were misinterpreted. God certainly does not kill plants, part of its own creation, but empty a group of people who pray. Prayer cannot be used destructively. The experiment did, however, demonstrate that the mental power generated by the prayers affected the plants. Their belief in the power of prayer was the effective agent, not God. Another form of prayer in mental consciousness is called treatment, and is usually associated with healing. We'll discuss it there.
Religion. The mental religions include most of what are called metaphysical religions, although some of them do rise into spiritual consciousness as well. These groups gained recognition because of the success of their healing activities. There are numerous other examples of mental religions. Voodoo practitioners can cure or heal with their minds. Notice that voodoo works best on people who believe voodoo works. In Hawaii, there were good kahunas who could heal and bad kahunas that could curse and kill. Some witchcraft, wizardry, and sorcery are based on mental power. Many primitive races, like the Aborigines in Australia, knew much more about the mind than we do today. The Aborigines could point a stick or a finger at people and kill them.
So what's the difference between voodoo and prayer bodily treatment? Like you were praying for a friend and you heal of cancer or something. But
not an effective use. I mean, they're both applications of mental power for an effect, and we couch all sorts of framework around it, but it's strictly a condition framework, and now we think prayers are good and voodoo is bad, but that's just the way we're brought up. The fact is that if the voodoo was used to heal, and the prayer group was used to kill plants, then voodoo is good and prayer is bad, right? It's all mental power. It can go in either direction.
Healing. There's been a great deal of effective mental healing done by practitioners of several of the metaphysical religions. Practitioners often use the term treatment for the practice of directing mental power at the patient to bring about healing. A strong enough belief in harmony or wellness can overcome a weaker belief in disharmony. The great majority of humanity, at the material level of consciousness, believes that germs and viruses cause disease. A metaphysical practitioner with a strong enough mind can overcome the effect of that belief with his or his mind. Often it involves phrases beginning with "you are." It is symbolized affirmations. Using hypnosis is
another comment. Just one thing there, because Joel talks about, when he was talking about the power of mental healing and losing, he talks about a very renowned mental practitioner who told his students that they should expect to limit their practice to 5 patients so that they'd be able to do a healing exercise for each of them 15 or 20 times a day if they expected to be able to maintain consistent results. So that shows how quickly the power of the mind can become ineffective against the same mind. This occurred to me with Amagon recently.
Using hypnosis is another example of mental healing. The power of the patient's mind is used to affect the patient's body through the patient's mind. There are numerous studies of the ability of the human mind to control the body, stopping bleeding, for example, or controlling the pulse or even the brainwaves. Biofeedback is another tool that helps develop the power of the mind to control the body. And as we mentioned earlier, prayer groups work. The belief of a group of people in the power of their prayers influence God's consciousness and effective mental power. The healing agent is the mental power generated by the believers, not the prayer. A large enough prayer group will have the same effect on its subject as the praying groups have on the planet. Other prayer groups that don't really believe in the power of prayer a hope that maybe it's worth a try usually fails. Psychosomatic healing is another example of mental healing. Also, the successful use of placebos, sugar pills with no medicinal properties at all, which are sometimes given in place of drugs to patients who believe they do contain medicine, demonstrates the power of
Just a sense of what mental healing is. It's power of the mind. Go ahead.
Supply. The mental concept of gaining supply is using mind to manifest material supply. Instead of trying to go out there and get material supply before others get it, the power of mind is used to create or attract it. Practitioners of the metaphysical religions may be called for help with things like supply or employment as well as healing. Affirmations are also used to manifest supply. Please observe that both material and mental consciousness involve using powers, and remember that one of the things we have to empty out before we can attain spiritual consciousness is the belief in more than one power. In fact, material and mental consciousness are both human rather than spiritual levels of consciousness. A spiritual being that having a human experience is a spiritual being that is now living at the material or mental level of consciousness. Part of the process of rediscovering that with spiritual beings is learning to recognize and rise above material and mental consciousness.
All right, let's stop there and we'll do the spiritual consciousness first next week, and then we can move on a bit. Well, I don't know, like 15 minutes. How are we doing? You want to wrap this chapter up? Or do you want to stop now and talk? Stop and talk. That's what I thought. That's a lot. What's common in both material and mental consciousness is that it's all about finding and using a power to overcome some other power or some other situation, okay? And that's very human, as distinct from spiritual. So, questions?
I have to. Was there ever a time when it wasn't the case? Like we talk about the 6 billion, 200 years ago, though, it wasn't 6 billion, it was much less. Why did humans become stupid? Yeah. Was there ever, patient zero? Suddenly everyone started believing that snakes were poisonous and you would die.
Barbara's revelation on that was that everything born ignorant. The way it was that paragraph is about that everything comes in its most ignorant, simplistic, acute forms. That foxes come in as acorns, and chickens come in as eggs. People come in as, our history over 100,000 years is we come in as apes, okay? And we come in as animals, not even human material consciousness, but as animal consciousness. It's developing into human consciousness, and there's certainly no ability to think about things spiritual or to think about God or to think about anything. You're confronted with a 24/7 struggle for life and death. And so obviously the way that looks is powers overcoming powers.
Always things.
Yeah, her revelation is that it is one of the natures of creation, of this Leelaa part of creation, to come in ignorant and sleep. And we do it. The consciousness does it lifetime to lifetime, growing, expanding in awareness. But each lifetime, the body comes in, the fetus actually goes through, fish stage and an animal stage and a reptile stage, and the body in the fetus reproduces the whole thing of being born ignorant and coming up to humans inside the womb. So it's one of the laws of the manifest nonsense.
You know what really jumped out at me in the very beginning? You said our belief in the laws of physics. Kind of stumped, because I was just knew that there was a belief and then there's a law or something. Mm-hmm. And I thought that it's the belief in the law of physics. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that's just really startled me. I just didn't get that it was a belief as well. Mm-hmm. And somehow I thought laws were different than beliefs. They were facts, and it was just kind of cool to get that was a belief.
You know, and there are laws. Mm-hmm. There are immutable laws. I mean, the way creation works, and we get really mushy here, but yeah, God's creation. We use that for now. We don't have to take it. We're not limited to what it is yet. God's creation is according to laws. You know, there is a lot of law in creation, and creation works in a particular way. And in this physical five-sense experience, we see reflections of those laws. There are laws that are immutable. Joel could prevent hurricanes from striking Hawaii, but he couldn't change the tide height, a millisecond or a millimeter. Okay, the way planets go around, there are laws that are laws, like the laws of gravity and stuff like that. And even though God's law isn't about material things, we are seeing a reflection of God's law in material things.
How does that tie?
So there are laws.
How does that tie in when in the Bible it says, you know, let's see you, how many hairs are your head? Let's see you raise yourself 1 cubit, and they're speaking of laws. Then those have nothing to do with the spiritual plane. So they're like completely separated, is what you're saying, right? Like, even though Joel couldn't change the tide, that had nothing to do with his consciousness, his spiritual consciousness, because they're completely separate. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what you mean by completely separate. I'm not following the question.
Well, because she's talking about, you know, the belief in physics and all that. So, physics, wouldn't that take maybe back to the material, which is below the mental?
What I'm saying is that some laws, some apparently material laws, are reflections of spiritual law.
Okay.
And those laws appear to be immutable. You can't change them. I mean, you don't get apples off of orange trees. Okay. You know, like begets like, and there are laws that go on, and you see physical representations of them. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It is certainly true physically, and it's always true, and it's also true mentally, and it's also true spiritually. That every action has an equal and opposite reaction. At least in spiritual work, at least equal and opposite. Maybe more than equal.
Well, we're not limited by the Newton's classical laws, that's the thing. It's just, you know, based on what the belief and stuff like that, and understanding and using quantum mechanics, I mean, it really is our belief in the laws and what holds back.
Sure. Yeah. And it certainly is true that, and through parapsychology lab can demonstrate, you know, I mean, the law of gravity shows that Newton's apple is going to hit the dirt, you know, but a strong enough parapsychologist, or a guy with a strong enough telekinetic power, could stop the apple. You know, so even those laws can be overlooked.
I mean, if there's 3 levels of human consciousness, and it's possible to, like, vacillate, like, between them, right?
Yeah.
Just watch me.
Right, because I just keep thinking of like how it said stress is a sure sign of the mental or the material. Yeah, just sure sign of the material. And reading the beginning, it's not different, really different levels of consciousness. It's just the awareness and any particular second in time, I guess my awareness is different.
Yeah, what are you looking at?
Right. So when I'm stressed, I'm at that level, and when I'm trying to do, there are no germs, and that's the mental level.
So if there are, they have no power, right?
Right.
I don't know, I mean, they might be germs, they just don't have any power. And Joel says that weather is probably a reflection of some activity in God, but none of God's activity causes disharmony and can cause disharmony because the nature of God is harmonious. And therefore, Joel knew that hurricanes and tidal waves were perfectly good candidates for him and his little group there in Hawaii to work on. And they stopped hurricanes and they stopped tidal waves, because that can't be a law of God. So he knows that those are metals, those are the product of human belief. And we are going to wander back and forth and like Joanne said, switch between KFEC and KGOD over and over and over again as we develop our consciousness, develop our awareness.
Well, the principle, the experience of that outreaching of our consciousness, is that different? I feel like it is, but I can't disagree from like the mental level of consciousness, whatever you're saying, mind creates it.
That's how it works.
It is the same, right?
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah. I mean, material laws are right if you're in the human world, and if you're at mental consciousness, mind does create matter. Matter is mind form. That's what it is. It really is true. And that's why metaphysics works. That matter is mind form. If there is such thing as matter, this is where you get off into the funny stuff and your multi-level question. Yeah. Matter is mind form. And so the content of your belief is what your mind is forming. And that's what we'll talk about here in some length in the next couple of chapters, but the fact is that mind is just a tool that forms whatever it's given to form. What mind is not this creative thing. Mind is a tool. It's like a projector, with a film in it. Whatever film you run, the projector puts it on the screen. Okay? Mind just creates the images, manifests the images, and they're five sense images, not just visual images. They're visual, audio, physical, tactile, but they're five sense images. The mind forms these holographic images in itself, depending on what film's being shown, which means depending on what you believe, depending on what your beliefs are. And in the case that you're not holding a belief, depending on what the 6 billion are believing. Okay?
And then that kind of gets into the protective work, or just always, from the consciousness is being mediated.
Yeah, that's what the protective work is about, is remembering that they don't have power. Not protecting yourself from them, it's remembering that they don't have power.
Right, and then you're saying, even saying like, the flu doesn't exist, the flu doesn't, like that's still opposite side of the same coin, and still means I believe in the spirit of some way. Right?
Okay. Yep, fighting it, and that's an example at the mental level of that reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. Fighting it sustains it. Carefully not thinking about it so you don't manifest it as a
Don't you need to learn how to kind of function like when Robert became enlightened at 14, he just didn't know how to act because he didn't know what happened. So he became disheveled and dirty and wouldn't take showers. And his parents were like, what the hell was this guy? And then he had to relearn, none of this is happening, but I can't be like, fight-chain, whatever. And so what I'm listening to her with this mental thing, I have, and on the different levels, I have to be in that resonance, all the protection and all that. I have to have this thought and this mind and the physical and that matter. And the whole point of in that is we both experience the same thing, but the classic thing was you and Jay and the nest in your house that you out-pictured, but he didn't. And it was a completely different, like you see a nest in the house and Jay doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was just like in that mental realm, how do you get out of that?
That's what we're doing here. You slowly learn truth and become aware of what you're doing. The way she gets out of that is when she finally is given the insight that messes the relative term that's in her mind. But there is no such thing as a mess.
Like it's just all is well.
Yeah. And that's the yeah. That's just to make her own decision. So the new flashcard. We got the new flashcard. Nothing has to change but my perception. My change needs me. So nothing has to change but my perception. Nothing has to change but my perception. The picture stays the same, but knowing what it is changes your experience of it.
I was, we're getting this house redone. I don't know anything about this. But I find myself sometimes being disappointed. I don't know why. I don't know what, and I've been using that. I don't know what this should look like among others. Those, but I ran into the granite was on the sink, and the sink that we bought, this really pretty blue sink, was under the granite. You couldn't see it very much, and I knew instantly it was wrong. Now, I've never seen one before. I didn't know how they were supposed to do it. I didn't know what the thing should do once we got it, but I was sure it was wrong. And I just stood there and I caught myself right away. And usually I don't know anything, and I don't know what this looks like, and it was just hysterical. Then I realized how easy it is to think that I know something when I know nothing about it, and then be instantly disappointed. Blue flesh has been tremendously helpful, especially in this process. Mm-hmm. It's quite funny watching this mind of mine.
That's the game. Watch this mind of yours. Watch what your mind does. Clearly.
If you were to visualize God, what would he look like? Like changing your concept of God.
If you can visualize God, you have a concept. That would be a concept. Joel finally moved to the term infinite invisible because infinite is a word we can't grasp with our small finite minds, and invisible is something that we can't form an image of in our mind. And so he referred to God as the infinite invisible in order to force his mind to not have a concept. And that's the point. The point is to not have a concept of God, but to have an experience of God. I can't say, I don't have an image of God, I don't have a visualization of God, but to me, God is a presence. And I mean, it's a tangible presence that feels like you can slice it and throw it on bread. sometimes. And sometimes it's just nothing. But
Does that mean it's not there?
no, I'm not aware of it in that moment.
Isn't like the thorn that removes the thorn when we say invisible, infinite invisible, that's a concept. But you use it as a tool
Yeah,
to...
yeah, you're exactly right, yes. Then you throw that one away, you stir the fire with that one until all the other concepts are burned up, and then you throw that one in too. The concept requires that you limit it, because you can't have a concept that isn't limiting. The nature of concepts is to limit and define it where you can put it in a box, right? That's what a concept is. And so if you have a concept of God, you've limited it. It's suddenly limited. If you characterize something, you put a restriction on it.
Isn't that why we have to get beyond the mind? That's what our mind likes to do, is put on that with anything. If we're thinking about it, we have a concept about it.
Yeah, that's the intellect. That's why the first thing that we said you have to empty out is your intellect. It's the mind, it's the intellect, it's the human busy brain that wants a concept because the brain doesn't feel good unless it's got everything in its appropriate cubbyhole.
Including other people, right?
Oh, for sure. And it doesn't care which cubbyhole, it's like another cubbyhole. It doesn't have to be the right cubbyhole, just a cubbyhole, right? Let's get quiet. Let's get quiet. Okay, thanks for coming. I love you all.